This episode is brought to you by HASA. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hey, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the Ultimate Pool Tools Hyper Pool, and I recently reviewed their 3x17 pool. I'll give you a rundown on what I think about their carbon fiber poles compared to the competition out there. There are now 3 major manufacturers of carbon fiber poles, and I'll run through some of the comparisons as well as the features of the Hyper Pole. Join my coaching program and take your pool service to the next level. Connect with other pool pros in your area, gain valuable knowledge, and transform your business with personalized one-on-one advice from me. With over 36 years of experience, I'm here to help you succeed like never before. Learn more at poolguycoaching.com. First, the parent company is the Ultimate Pool Tools. They make the Hyper Pole and some other products, which I'll cover here as well for you, so you get an idea of the other products they make. And basically, the Hyper Pole comes in a lot of various sizes. You have a 3x13, which is 5 feet and 5 inches collapsed, and 13 feet 1 inch when it's expanded. Then you have the 15-foot pole, which really was made famous by the Primate carbon fiber pole. The 6x15.6 was one of the first carbon fiber poles on the market, and a lot of guys gravitated towards that because it collapses down to about 6 feet, which everyone liked to put in the back of their truck. So they have that size available. The one that I reviewed was the 6.8 by 17.1, which is very similar to what you would get if you got the Skimmer dually, which I believe goes to about 18 feet. So it's pretty close to that. You can pretty much vacuum most pools from one side with a 17-foot pole. Now, the Hyper Pole is a little bit different than the Primate pole in the size of it. The Primate pole, the tubes that have a larger diameter, where the Ultimate pole has been going towards a skinnier diameter in the tubing. I don't really think that's a factor for me, but some people may like the thinner tubing of the Hyper Pole, I should say, over the Primate pole. And the Skimmer pole is also a little bit on the wider side, like the Primate pole itself. Now, the Primate pole has vertical lever locks, whereas the Hyper Pole has horizontal lever locks, much like the Skimmer carbon fiber pole, or the Carbon Light pole as they call it. So the horizontal locks are very similar in both of those poles, although the Hyper Pole, I think their horizontal clamps are a little bit better made than the Skimmer ones, and they're pretty comparable to the Primate horizontal clamps that flip open horizontally. Basically, the difference is that the Hyper Pole has a horizontal clamp latch that you flip horizontally, and the Primate has a vertical one, which some people find more easier. I don't know if that's a good way of phrasing it. A little easier to flip open when they're extending and retracting the tubes versus the horizontal clamps. It's just a preference, I think, and you can get used to either of those, I think, so it's not a big deal. But the Hyper Pole does have pretty robust clamps that are easy to adjust, which is the turn of your hand on this little dial on the outside. So I would say that they do make a really solid clamp that you can extend to different tube sections. But let me get back a little bit to the sizes. I kind of paused there for a moment and went on a little tangent. They have a 20-foot pole, which is a 7x20, which is very similar to the Skimlight. If you ever had that pole, it was a 21-foot pole. They also have a 22-foot pole. Now we're heading into like commercial pool territory where the clamp size isn't as convenient. But let's say you wanted a 22-foot pole. It's 7 feet roughly, or 6 feet 9 inches by 22 feet. And then the 26-foot pole is 7 feet 9 inches collapsed to 26.4. And they even have a 32-foot pole, which is 9 feet 9 inches by 32 and 11 inches. So that's almost 33 feet actually. So I think that's a something that if you wanted to do that, you can definitely get that particular pole if you have commercial pools. I don't believe these are the lightest carbon fiber pools on the market. In fact, I think the Skimlight Carbon Light is probably a little bit lighter than the Primate. They're pretty close in weight as far as lightness. So if you're looking for a light pole, definitely the Hyper pole isn't quite, I don't think, as light as their competitors. You really don't notice a huge difference though. And, I wouldn't say that's a deal breaker in a lot of people's books, but it may be a factor. For instance, the Primate, these 3x16 weighs about 2.5 pounds, and the Ultimate Pool Tool site says that their 3x17, which is a little bit bigger, granted, weighs 3 to 4 pounds. Since they're handmade, the weight will vary with that particular pole. And I should put a little correction here. When I was doing the pole sizes, the 16-foot pole is actually a 2x16-foot pole. So it's just your standard two-piece pole, a lot like the Smart Company Power Pole is a two-piece pole. They make this a two-piece pole as well. And Primate also has an 8x16 two-foot pole as well. Some people like the two-foot pole, the two-part pole versus the tri-pole, I should say. And the tri-pole is my preferred one because it'll collapse down a little smaller. Plus, I really like having the third section. It just seems to make cleaning the pools a lot easier in my area where the backyard's tighter and I don't have a lot of room for the extra length of the pole when it's not collapsed down, if that makes sense. So the tri-poles are much more popular, I think, in my area in Southern California. Probably some areas in Florida, the tri-poles would be really popular with those screened-in pools. But a lot of guys do like the two-piece poles, the 8x16-foot pole, and they do make a model. I don't really see it on their site, but I see it listed in their description of different sizes. So I think if you're looking for different size poles, the Hyper Pole pretty much has, every pole size you can think of to accommodate whatever you think your need is for different sizes. I think the sweet spot is a 16 or 17 foot pole, although I've used a 15-foot pole successfully. It's just, again, a matter of preference, but the sweet spot for a tri-pole is 16 or 17 feet for most pools to clean them on one side and to get down to some pools that are deeper, maybe 9 or 10 feet deep. Some other aspects of the pole, and I don't really know what this means, but it's 3K twill carbon fiber weave, which is probably a really strong weave. Carbon fiber is really strong compared to any other material, so it's going to be, at least 3 times stronger than your standard aluminum pole out there. It has a nice stainless steel tool in. I think the first generation of the carbon fiber poles didn't have the stainless steel tool in. I have one of those still. Actually, no, I lost that one. That's the one that fell off my truck, which was a very sad day. But that just had holes drilled in the carbon fiber. But that is not the strongest way to have the tool end, and that was rectified pretty quickly in the industry. So all the carbon fiber poles have the stainless steel tool end. It just makes sense. It's going to make it last longer. And they also have the stainless steel tool end on the Hyper pole. They also have a hyper drain in the front, which will allow the water to fill and drain rapidly from the pole. This is probably a good feature. Most poles have 2 little holes that drain the water, so it's something that is kind of unique to this pole to where it's actually patented, so no one can copy the design, and it just will drain the water out rapidly, and it'll actually fill with water also rapidly. So that's a good feature with this pole. The strength, it's super strong. It's a carbon fiber pole. Now, there is physics involved, so here's where they can break and snap. So you have to kind of use your logic and maybe go back to your high school. I don't know if you took physics in high school, but maybe you took geometry, let's say. And so if you have the pole fully extended to 17 feet, you have 3 pole sections fully extended. And if you know anything about what's going to happen at this point when you're trying to get, let's say, a hammerhead or riptide out of the bottom, and let's say that it's full of leaves. So this thing already dry weighs a lot. I don't know how much it weighs, 8 pounds, 10 pounds dry. And then wet with the full bag full of leaves, you're pulling it out of the pool. If you try to pull it out of the pool with all 3 sections extended, of course the pole may snap because it's just the distribution of weight across the 3 lengths of pole versus the pendulum or the heavy riptide with the bag on there. And you may have a problem with the pole snapping or breaking. Any pole would probably snap or break, except maybe the strongest aluminum pole. I'm thinking of their Titan pole that they make also, and I'll cover that in a separate podcast, which is a really heavy-duty aluminum pole, much like the Skimlight Brute pole, but the Brute is a bit heavier and much heavier-duty aluminum, but it's a very strong aluminum pole. So, of course, you could break the pole that way. If you have it against the coping of the pool and you're pushing back on it, trying to get something out of the water, let's say there's, I had this happen to me where a 10-pound weight fell into the pool. Well, technically the kids put it in the pool. So let's say you're getting that out and you're trying to get the brush and pushing it over to the side and you're leaning it against the coping and you have it extended, fully extended. Well, of course, you could probably snap it that way as well. So I'm just saying this because nothing is indestructible, but logically, if you have the tubes not fully extended and you're just holding it with all the tubes collapsed into the one section, you're probably not going to break the pole no matter what you do, because at that point it's got its full strength. And I think it's a really strong pole. Again, the tube is skinnier than the Primate pole and the Skimlight pole, so that I don't think that's a factor, but it's interesting how much skinnier the tube diameter is compared to the other carbon fiber poles. So on their site, it says it's the strongest pole with the strength to weight ratio. And that's kind of some of the things I described there about not having it fully extended while you're trying to pull something out of the pool. Now, let me go over some of the other things that the Ultimate Pool Tools makes, because again, they're trying to be more than just a carbon fiber pole company. They're also trying to expand into other products. They do have a new Titan aluminum pole, which I'll talk about in a separate podcast because I think it deserves its own time. It's definitely a pretty unique product. They have something called the Hyper Valve. It's a really cool product that you can use if you have pools with 2 skimmers and you're trying to regulate one, or if you want to try to close off one and vacuum with the other. Of course, you can use a tennis ball is what most pool pros will use. They'll just drop a tennis ball in there and close it off, but it's more specifically made to regulate one skimmer. So for instance, let's say you have a suction cleaner connected at one skimmer and the other skimmer has no Jandy valves or no valves at the equipment, which is very common with builders in California. I don't know why they don't go the extra mile and just put in a Jandy valve, but they don't. But if you're trying to turn off one skimmer or regulate one skimmer, I should say, not turn it off, but you want to kind of reduce the suction, this threads in to 1.5 inch fitting, or the actually plumbing coming out of the skimmer, I should say. It's not a fitting. And then you just thread this in and you can actually regulate the flow of one of the other skimmers, which is cool. They have an auto fill miser 60 wrench. We don't really have a lot of these in my area, but you can definitely use this one here, this tool. Again, the application for it here is not as big as the application maybe somewhere else. We have a lot of the autofills are just the toilet bowl kind of float things that you see out there. Here's a product that I really want to spotlight. It's called the Hyper Patch. This is a really cool product. I think it's pretty toxic because it smells really bad when you open the bag, so be careful when you're handling it. It's like a epoxy, very similar to, I don't know if anyone's ever used like the JB Weld when you mix 2 tubes together, one's black and one's gray, and then it makes like a really hard bond. You use this if you're kind of welding metal. But this is a very similar product to that. It actually smells very similar to that as well. And the gray color looks very similar to one of the JB Weld components, but it's in a patch form. It's flat, and what you do is you kind of warm it up a little bit on your dashboard. In California, that's not a problem because it's like 80 degrees in the winter as well as the summer. It's in the hundreds. Warm it up slightly on your dashboard, and it's a 3x6 patch. So if you have like a chlorinator you removed, or a temp sensor that you're relocating, or if you have like a Nature 2, a lot of pools have these old Nature 2s that are just deteriorating on the plumbing. You want to remove that. There's a hole in there. There's like a pretty big hole with the Nature 2. So instead of cutting the pipe and replumbing it, this kind of reminds me of Mikey's quick couplers, the couplers that he invented that clip together. So if you have a broken coupler, Mikey's quick couplers are great because they snap together and you don't have to replumb everything to get to it. And this is similar. You just put this on there, and then it's better on a sunny day, of course, because you want the sun's UV rays to cure it. So in about 10 minutes it hardens, and I think it's somewhere around 390 psi, so close to 400 psi, which most pools don't have 400 psi going through the plumbing, and it'll basically replace those black clamps that you see that we used to see back in the 90s and early 2000s, those compression clamps that are on equipment that are really ineffective. So this is like a permanent solution to a PVC pipe that has a hole in it. It's called the Hyper Patch, and you can find it on their site. You can just put Ultimate Pool Tools Hyper Patch in Google. It'll take you to the Hyper Patch, and it seems to be a great product that works really effectively. So I would recommend trying it. And again, it will cure in the sun pretty rapidly. I really like the concept of the product, so definitely you would want to get that. Some other parts that they sell as well. They have their grip, of course, and then they have their Hyperpole speed clamps is what they call them, available. They have the Hyper Clip, the same thing that they sell at the Primate Pool Tools is a clip that you can use for your leaf rake and brush. They also sell what I like, the thing that I like is the pole guard. So this is something you put on the pole right above the stainless steel tip, and basically you just get a heat gun, which I have, or I guess a hairdryer would work effectively as well, and you just kind of heat shrink it on to the pole. That'll protect the pole from scraping the coping. Also, if you have a fiberglass pool, this is something that happened to someone in my group. One of their employees had the pole, and they gouged out a part of the steps because they're riptide against the step area, and they're kind of using that to lift it. Well, with the pole guard on there, I don't think it would have gouged out the fiberglass because it is a soft rubber type material that protects the pole, and it probably would protect the fiberglass in the pool in that instance. So definitely put that on your pole. But that's kind of the rundown of the other things they have available. I think they're expanding their tools section and becoming kind of what their namesake is, the Ultimate Pool Tools, beyond the Hyperpole. But the Hyperpole actually put them on the map. And again, they have these different sizes. Let me see if I can find the 2x16 pole here. So I don't see it here listed on their site anymore. So I'm not sure if they're going to make the 2x16. I'll probably have to ask them about that. But maybe they weren't as popular as the tri-poles, which again, I think the tri-poles are really great. I should mention too, before I get too far out, that the poles that were 22 feet, 26 feet, and 32 feet are actually 4x poles. So there's 4 sections there, not 3 sections. They do make a 3x20, which is a 20-foot pole with 3 sections, but the 22-foot, 26, and 32-foot, I'll stand corrected, are 4x26, 4x32. So there's actually 4 sections there. So that was my mistake when I'm reading their chart here. Probably should pay more attention when I'm reading stuff, but there you have it. So that's the Hyperpole and some other products by Ultimate Pool Tools. If you're looking for other podcasts I've recorded, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. Just click on the podcast icon on the banner. That'll take you to a drop-down menu of other podcasts I have recorded there. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.